So imagine you're writing a book, right? And the main character is just this guy standing around in his boxers.
Right. Just completely under-equipped.
Yeah, exactly. He is in his boxers wearing a leather jacket, and he's carrying his ex-girlfriend's Persian cat.
Which is, wait, the cat is suddenly sentient too, right?
Oh, totally. Sentient, talking the whole 9 yards. And he's carrying this cat through an underground dungeon that is absolutely filled with monsters.
It's just such a wild premise.
It really is. And, you publish it yourself. You don't go through the traditional system at all.
Right. It's totally independent.
Yeah. And somehow you build this massive, fiercely loyal fan base entirely outside the traditional publishing.
Which is, that's incredibly hard to do.
No, it's the absolute dream, right? But then, out of nowhere, you land a multi-million-dollar Hollywood television deal.
The ultimate validation.
Exactly. But then, and this is where it gets crazy almost overnight, that surreal comedic premise about fighting aliens sparks this vicious, highly politicized war in the halls of modern.
Yeah, it escalated so quickly.
Right. It pulls you into this screaming match about whether you've, sold your soul to the corporate machine.
Well, it is the ultimate modern paradox, right?
Yeah.
You create this piece of deeply weird, radically independent art. And the moment it even brushes against the mainstream,
it just blows up.
Exactly. It becomes a proxy battleground for the entire internet culture.
Which is just exhausting, but also fascinating.
It is. We're essentially looking at a masterclass in how the modern digital ecosystem digests success today.
Right. And to be clear for you listening, the specific conflict we are mapping out in today's deep dive centers on a highly critical video essay.
Yeah, a transcript of a video essay specifically.
Right. From an independent creator and author named John Del Aro. And he has trained his site squarely on Matt Dinniman.
Who is the creator of that wildly successful book series you just described.
Right. Dungeon Crawler Carl. So the friction here isn't just, two guys disagreeing on the internet.
No, it's much bigger than that.
It's really about the underlying machinery of how art gets made and sold today.
Absolutely, because Del Aro is making some massive accusations here.
He really is. He's talking about what it actually costs an independent creator to get that Hollywood.
Right, the hidden price tag.
Exactly. He brings up ideological conformity, retroactive cancellation, and this concept he calls taking the ticket.
Which is a huge claim to unpack.
It is. So to really understand this, we have to look objectively at the mechanics of the controversy.
And just to set the ground rules here.
Yeah, let's make this crystal clear. We aren't here to declare a winner between these two authors.
No.
Or to validate their politics, frankly. We are simply autopsying the battlefield, basically, to help you understand the economic and psychological forces driving these modern media wars.
Yeah, because to understand the war, you first really have to understand the territory they're fighting over.
Okay, lay it out for us.
Right, so that territory is this massive, relatively new literary phenomenon known as LitRPG.
Which is huge.
It's massive. But before we get to the actual mechanics of the genre, we need to look at the narrative of Dungeon Crawler Carl itself.
Right, because the story kind of mirrors what's happening in real life.
It fundamentally mirrors the real-world business conflict happening around it. It's actually kind of eerie.
So what's the actual premise?
So the premise is a masterstroke of modern dystopian satire.
Okay.
An alien corporation arrives at Earth, but they don't launch a traditional military invasion like you'd see in Independence Day or whatever.
Right. No laser beams destroying the White House.
Well, sort of, but worse. They instantly vaporize every single man-made structure on the surface.
Just wiped out.
Completely. They claim the planet's resources, and then they force the surviving humans into an 18-level subterranean dungeon.
Which sounds terrifying, but it's not just a standard survival game, is it?
No, and this is the kicker. The aliens are broadcasting this descent into the dungeon as a highly produced, sadistic, intergalactic reality television show.
Oh, wow. So it's basically like Survivor, but with the apocalypse.
Exactly. They are literally monetizing the end of the world.
That is so dark.
It's very dark. The humans are fighting for their lives, but their survival depends entirely on their ability to entertain trillions of alien viewers across the galaxy.
Wait, so if you're not entertaining?
If you are boring, you don't get the sponsorship. You don't get the loot drops you need to survive the next floor. You just die.
Wow. So it is a devastating critique of attention.
That's exactly what it is. It takes that existential dread of cosmic horror, the idea that humanity is small and totally insignificant.
Right.
And it marries it to the cynical, manufactured drama of network reality.
So where do Carl and the cat fit in?
Right. So the protagonists, Carl and his talking Persian cat, Princess Donut.
Princess Donut, I love that.
That's great. They are forced to navigate this incredibly hostile environment, but they're constantly having to perform for the cameras.
Because they need the alien viewers to like them.
Exactly. They have to play into tropes. They have to manage their public relations with alien fan clubs.
Oh, that's hilarious.
And they have to navigate the capricious whims of the showrunners who actually control their reality.
And this whole framework is really the perfect vehicle for the LitRPG genre, right?
It's literally tailor-made for it.
Yeah. So for anyone listening who isn't familiar, LitRPG stands for literary role.
Right, which I admit sounds incredibly niche if you've never encountered.
Yeah, it really does. But basically, you take traditional science fiction or fantasy world building,
Right.
and you explicitly graft the hard mathematical mechanics of a video game directly onto the narrative.
Yeah, and that transition from traditional fantasy to lit RPG is just a fascinating shift in how we consume narrative today.
How so? Like, what's the difference between this and, say, Lord of the Rings?
Well, think about classic fantasy, Tolkien, or even modern stuff like George R.R. Martin.
Right.
The progression of a character's power is very abstract. A wizard studies ancient tomes and becomes, vaguely more powerful over time.
Or a swordsman practices and gets a bit faster.
Exactly. The reader just has to trust the author's descriptive language to understand that growth. LitRPG completely shatters that abstraction.
Because it's literally mathematical.
It is mathematically quantified.
Yeah.
Carl literally has a character sheet.
Like in Dungeons and Dragons.
Exactly like that. When he defeats a monster, the reader sees the exact number of experience points he gains.
Oh, wow.
Yeah. We see his strength stat increase from 14 to a 15. We see him manage a digital inventory system right there on the page.
I keep thinking of this as the literary equivalent of what massive Twitch streamer.
Oh, that is a perfect analogy.
Right, because millions of people will spend hours just watching someone else play a video game. They're reacting to the loot drops, cheering when the streamer levels up.
Yeah, it's that shared experience.
And LitRPG seems to capture that exact same dopamine loop, but just in text form. Plus, you get the internal monologue of the character actually experience.
Which is huge. It taps into a very specific, I'd say, psychological craving for modern readers.
What do you mean?
Well, think about it. The real world is incredibly chaotic.
Oh, definitely.
You can work a corporate job for 5 years, put in 60-hour week, and have absolutely no measurable progress to show for it.
Yeah, there's no progress bar hovering over your desk telling you when you're going to get a...
Right. But LitRPG, it offers a pure, uncorrupted meritocracy.
Effort equals reward.
Exactly. You swing an axe at a goblin, you get 10 experience points. It is a closed-loop behavioral reward system, basically a Skinner box translated into fiction.
That makes total sense. And in his critique, John Del Arroz points out that this specific psychological appeal actually stepped in to fill a massive demographic void in the publishing industry.
He does. He argues that traditional mainstream publishing, like the big houses in New York, essentially abandoned what he calls male-oriented action adventure.
So they just stopped publishing.
According to Del Arroz, yeah. He says they shifted their editorial focus toward different demographics, different themes.
It left millions of readers hanging.
Right. Readers who just wanted explosions, stat sheets, and straightforward heroic progression without any sort of underlying baggage.
Now, whether that abandonment by traditional publishing was a deliberate ideological shift or just a massive misreading of market trends is obviously highly...
Very debated. But the resulting market vacuum, that is undeniable.
Yeah.
Nature abhors a vacuum, and capitalism definitely abhors an unmonetized demographic.
So true. So LitRPG just flooded into that space.
It did, and it was driven almost entirely by self-published authors utilizing Amazon's Kindle direct publishing platform.
Just totally bypassing the gatekeeper.
Completely.
Yep.
And Dungeon Crawler Carl became the absolute vanguard of that movement.
Because it wasn't just a clunky video game simulation, right?
Exactly. Matt Dinniman didn't just write a system. He wrote a genuinely brilliant, darkly comedic, highly competent piece of satire that transcended all the clunky mechanics of the early LitRPG stuff.
And Del Arroz actually openly admits this in the source material.
He does.
He isn't criticizing the quality of the books at all. He says Dinniman has immense talent, the humor is addictive, and the first book is almost universal.
Yeah, he gives him a lot of credit for the art itself.
But he captured this massive audience that felt alienated by the mainstream. And of course, that massive success triggered the inevitable next phase of the modern media life.
Which is when the mainstream establishment realizes they can't ignore it anymore.
Right. The mountain comes to Muhammad.
Exact. The transition from a self-published Amazon darling to a major Hollywood adaptation is a tectonic shift for any intellectual property.
So let's talk about that TV deal, because the source material details that Dungeon Crawler Carl has actually been picked up by Fuzzy Door.
Which is Seth MacFarlane's production company.
Right. And they're adapting it into a streaming series for Peacock, which is just wild to think about. Seth MacFarlane is such an interesting fit.
He really is.
Because he's built his whole empire on blending absolute absurdity with dark, often cynical comedy. I mean, think of Family Guy or American Dad.
Yeah, he knows how to balance weirdness with mainstream appeal.
Exactly. But he also operates very comfortably within massive corporate structure. And they aren't cutting corners here at all. The script is being written by Chris Yost,
who is a veteran writer deeply embedded in the Marvel Cinematic Universe and Disney.
Yeah, so this isn't some indie passion project being filmed on a shoestring budget in someone's backyard.
Not at all. The inclusion of an MCU writer is a really crucial data point here.
Because it shows they're taking it seriously.
Because it signals that NBC Universal, which is Peacock's parent company, views this as a potential tentpole franchise.
Oh, wow. Like a flagship show.
Exact. The source notes they are currently in the thick of production development, scripts are being drafted, and crucially, CGI testing is
CGI testing. I mean, for a property that features a talking Persian cat, diverse alien species, massive dungeon environments, the financial implications of that cannot be overstated.
We are talking about an astronomical production.
Yeah.
Tens of millions of dollars.
Which fundamentally alters the power dynamic.
Completely. Because when you are an indie author writing on Patreon or Amazon, your only boss is the algorithm and your direct readership.
Right. If you write a weird chapter, maybe you lose a few subscribers.
It's a localized risk. But when Peacock starts pouring tens of millions of dollars into rendering Princess Donut's fur in 4K resolution,
you suddenly have a whole board of corporate risk assessment executives scrutinizing your every move.
Exactly. You transition from being an artist, creating a world, to being the human liability attached to a $100 million corporate asset.
And that transition is exactly where Del Ara's focus.
Yes. He argues that this level of mainstream integration requires a compromise, that you have to surrender the very independent spirit that made the work popular in the first place.
Which brings up a really fascinating philosophical tension. Because Dungeon Crawler Carl is, at its core, a satirical takedown of a massive, soulless corporation that exploits individuals for broadcast entertainment. And now, that exact satire is being funded, produced, and broadcast by a massive, real-world corporate streaming network.
It really forces the question, does institutionalizing the satire inherently defang it?
Yeah. Is it the ultimate subversion, like using corporate money to broadcast an anti-corporate message, or is it just the ultimate?
Right. Are you still fighting the intergalactic showrunners, or did you just sign a multi-season contract to become their highest paid talent?
And when you sign that contract, the corporation expects a sanitized public image. They demand brand safety.
Always.
Which leads directly to this specific incident that Del Ara's claims proves Dinniman has submitted to this corporate sanitization.
Yeah, let's get into that. Because with massive corporate investment comes intense forensic scrutiny of an author's digital footprint.
They check everything.
Oh, everything. And the source material points to a controversy that stems from a seemingly innocuous decision made years ago, back in 2020.
Okay, what happened in 2020?
So, during the production of the audiobook for the third installment of the series, the narrator approached Dinniman with a fairly standard cross-promotional idea.
Sure.
They needed a voice for a minor character, a drunk dwarf, and they suggested bringing in a YouTube personality known as the Critical Drinker.
Right. And back in 2020, the Critical Drinker was sitting around, what, 500,000 subscribers?
Go around there.
And his whole online persona was just a guy doing sarcastic, alcohol-fueled reviews of movies.
Very standard YouTube fare at the time.
Exactly. So for an indie author trying to boost audiobook sales, this is just basic algorithmic cross-pollination. You hire a YouTuber with a big audience, they mention your book on their channel, and you capture a percentage of their viewers.
It's just smart marketing. And Dinniman claims he had absolutely no idea what the guy's specific political leanings were back then. He just saw a Scottish guy doing funny movie reviews.
Which makes sense. It was a purely transactional audience exchange, highly common in the independent creator economy.
Right. However, over the subsequent years, the Critical Drinkers channel experienced explosive growth.
Oh, he's massive now.
Massive. And he grew largely by leaning heavily into a specific lane of cultural critique. He became widely known for aggressively reviewing mainstream media through a lens highly critical of what he terms woke messaging, diversity initiatives, and progressive ideological insertions in film and television.
Right, so his brand became deeply tethered to one side of the modern culture war.
Exactly.
Which suddenly makes him a highly radioactive asset for a mainstream Hollywood production company to be associated with.
Very radioactive. And this is where the retroactive digital scrubbing begins.
Okay, so what did Dinniman?
Well, Del Ara's details how Dinniman recently went on to Reddit, which is the central hub for his most dedicated fan base, and publicly aggressively disavowed his past collaboration with the critical drinker.
Oh, wow. What did he actually say?
The language he used was unambiguous and deeply personal. He stated profound regret that his literary universe had any association whatsoever with his creator. Yeah. He claimed the association made him physically sick, and he expressed a desire to have the vocal performance completely excised from all future editions of the audiobook.
Wow, just totally erased.
And he punctuated the statement by referring to the YouTuber as an edgelord douchebag.
Yikes. That is a fascinating pivot, though, because it totally contradicts the community guidelines Dinniman had previously championed for his own fandom.
Right.
Because the source points out that Dinniman historically supported his forum moderator when they aggressively deleted any political thread.
He did.
He used to argue that artists shouldn't distract from their art by shining a spotlight on their personal politics. He famously said the internet has plenty of places where people can uselessly shriek at each other and not get close to change minds.
And that contradiction is the absolute linchpin of De La Rosa's argument. He views this sudden, highly visible public denunciation as a calculated performance, rather than some organic moral awakening.
I see.
In the framework of brand management, when a creator transitions from the wild west of the indie internet to the highly risk-averse environment of network television, their past associations become huge liabilities.
Yeah, right.
So De La Rosa posits that Dinniman isn't genuinely sickened by a minor voice cameo from 2020. Rather, he is aggressively signaling to his new Hollywood partners that he is a safe, compliant, and ideologically aligned asset.
So it's basically the corporate equivalent of frantically deleting old tweets before HR runs a background check for a Fortune 500 job.
Exactly that.
But instead of just quietly removing the audio file, he made a public spectacle of the denunciation.
Because the spectacle is the point. De La Rosa refers to this specific behavioral shift as taking the ticket.
Taking the ticket. Okay, what are the actual mechanics of this ticket in the entertainment?
So taking the ticket is a metaphor for the ideological toll gate that De La Rosa believes guards the entrance to mainstream cultural and financial success. His central thesis is that the traditional gatekeepers, the major publishers, the streaming networks, the elite talent agency, they operate as an ideological monoculture.
Right.
They do not merely require a profitable product, they require the creator to publicly align with a specific set of progressive cultural values.
Yeah.
To get the massive network deal, you have to buy the ticket, and the currency is your public conformity.
And he actually compares Dinniman's trajectory directly to Brandon Sanderson, doesn't he?
He does, yeah.
Which is wild because Sanderson is arguably the most financially successful living fantasy author. I mean, the guy ran a Kickstarter that pulled in tens of millions of dollars. He is an absolute titan.
Unprecedented success.
So De La Rosa claims that as Sanderson ascended to this untouchable tier of mainstream success, his work began to change. He says Sanderson started injecting more diverse storylines and LGBTQ characters into his massive fantasy epic.
Right. And De La Rosa interprets Sanderson's narrative evolution not as, artistic growth or a reflection of the author's shifting worldview.
Right. He sees it as a mandatory capitulation to industry expectations.
So he thinks it's forced.
Exactly. He views the inclusion of these characters as overt virtue signal, a necessary sacrifice to maintain his status within the upper echelons of the publishing hierarchy.
And he applies this same lens to Dinniman.
He does. He applies it to Dinniman's refusal to associate with anyone's right wing. De La Rosa categorized absolute boundary drawing as a form of ideological bigotry, an unwillingness to engage with humanity outside of a prescribed bubble.
To hammer this home, he actually contrasts Dinniman with Andy Weir, the guy who wrote The Martian.
Yes, that's a key comparison.
Because when The Martian was being adapted into a massive Ridley Scott film, Weir didn't run purity tests on the people covering his work. According to the source, Weir was perfectly happy to engage with the critical drinker's audience.
Right.
He essentially said, I wrote a cool sci-fi book. There's a movie coming out. I hope you guys go see it. He treated that audience purely as consumers of entertainment, not as political adversaries that needed to be quarantined. And that comparison highlights two fundamentally different strategies for navigating public relations in such a polarized era.
What are they?
Well, Weir employs what you might call the neutral merchant strategy. My product is available to anyone with the currency to buy it, regardless of their ideology.
Well, makes sense.
Dinniman, according to this critique at least, has adopted the curated exclusivity strategy, where the creator actively polices the moral purity of their consumer base to align with the demands of their corporate partner.
Okay, but let's stress test De La Rosa's underlying assumption here for a second.
Sure.
Because he assumes that the only reason a successful author would suddenly suddenly become vocal about progressive politics is because Hollywood executives force them.
Right, the deterministic.
Right. But isn't the exact opposite scenario infinitely more probable? Think about it. When you are an indie author trying to claw your way up the Amazon chart, you are terrified of alienating a single reader.
Oh, absolutely. You need every click.
You smile, you play nice, you cross-promote with everyone because you need the algorithm. You are operating from a place of intense financial precarity.
The vulnerability of the indie creator is very real.
Exact. But the moment you sign a massive deal with Peacock, the moment your financial future is permanently secured, that precarity,
You're safe.
you finally have the ultimate shield, FU money. Isn't it highly likely that Dinniman isn't virtue signaling for a corporate board, but rather he finally feels safe enough to publicly express the genuine, deeply held personal beliefs he had to suppress when just trying to survive the algorithm?
That's a very strong counter.
Right. He doesn't need to pander to right-wing YouTube audiences anymore, so he simply stops.
Right. That is the psychological counterweight to Delarose's theory, because Delarose's framework is heavily deterministic. It assumes the corporate machine always dictates the artist's behavior.
Yeah.
It leaves very little room for the concept of sudden liberation through success. However, Delarose would likely argue that even if the beliefs are genuine, the mechanism of expressing them, like the aggressive public denunciation of former associates, is a learned behavior specific to the mainstream ecosystem.
Oh, I see.
It's not just about expressing a belief, it's about performing an excommunication to prove your loyalty to the new tribe.
Wow. Which brings us to the most complex layer of this entire, the art itself.
The actual books.
Right. We've been talking about the politics around the books, the Reddit posts, the voice actor drama, but the source points out a massive, frankly startling admission from Dinniman about the actual text of Dungeon Crawler Carl.
This is where it gets really interesting.
Because despite his previous claims about wanting to keep politics out of his fan space, he openly admits that the books themselves are deeply intentionally political.
Yeah, it is a fascinating pivot from his earlier stance on subreddit moderation. In a direct quote, analyzed by the source, Dinniman strips away any ambiguity.
What does he say?
He states that political themes are not just incidental background. They are a major theme embedded into the core architecture of the series.
Right.
He explicitly points to an upcoming installment, ominously titled Operation Bounce House, and he warns his readership that his personal stances on a variety of sensitive subjects are going to become painfully obvious.
And sure, he doesn't stop there. He delivers a quote that absolutely infuriates Delarose.
Oh, the skull quote.
Yes. Dinniman says he hopes people from all across the political spectrum can enjoy the books at face value, just enjoying the explosions and the stats. But his ultimate goal, in his own words, is to drill through their thick skulls with his political...
Yeah.
He acknowledges that it probably won't work, that people are stubborn, but that is his stated intent. He is trying to force an ideological realization into the minds of readers who might fundamentally disagree with him.
The phrasing drill through their thick skulls is incredibly combative.
Very combative.
It shifts the dynamic between author and reader from a relationship of mutual entertainment to one of hostile education.
Hostile education. That's a great way to put it.
And Delarose seizes on this instantly. He views this as the ultimate mask-off moment for the mainstream left-leaning creator class.
Right.
To Delarose, this quote is dripping with insufferable elitism. It perfectly encapsulates the mindset that views conservative or non-conforming audiences not as equals with different priorities, but as intellectually deficient subjects in desperate need of moral re-education.
It operates exactly like a Trojan horse.
Elaborate.
Well, you build this beautiful, shiny wooden horse out of video game mechanics, talking cats, and hilarious dungeon traps.
The LitRPG elements.
Right. The audience, who are just looking for an escape from the exhausting real-world culture war, happily wheels the horse inside their city walls. But hidden inside the belly of the horse are the author's highly specific political ideas, waiting to jump out and drill into their mind while their defenses are down.
Right.
It's an admission of producing covert propaganda masked as pulp entertainment.
You know, you are brushing up against a foundational concept in literary analysis known as reader response theory.
Oh, what's that?
Historically, critics focused entirely on the author's intent or the text itself in a vacuum. But reader response theory, championed by theorists like Stanley Fish, argues that a text does not actually exist until it is read. The meaning is created in the active psychological transaction between the reader's lived experience and the words on the page.
So the author's intended message is only half the equation. If the reader's brain rejects the message fails to materialize.
Precisely. If Dinniman writes a sprawling, anti-capitalist, pro-collectivist critique of modern exploitation,
Right.
but a reader completely ignores the subtext and just thrills at the visceral joy of Carl leveling up his shotgun skills and blowing up a digital goblin who owns the meaning of the book.
That's a great...
According to reader response theory, the reader's experience is entirely valid. The Trojan horse entered the city, but the soldiers inside never managed to open the door.
That is a hilarious image. The author is trapped inside the wooden horse, banging on the walls, yelling about socioeconomic theory.
Exactly.
And the reader is just outside, admiring the craftsmanship of the horse.
Just having a great time.
Right. If a political message is buried so deeply beneath layers of addictive gamification and comedy that half your audience doesn't even realize they're reading propaganda until the author explicitly points it out in a Reddit AMA, does the politics actually matter? Has the author failed at propaganda because they were too successful at writing an entertaining story?
Well, Delaroz would argue that the effectiveness of the propaganda is secondary to the profound disrespect inherent in the attempt.
It's about the intent.
Exactly. The anger stems from the breach of trust. When an audience reads an indie action adventure, they are entering a silent contract with the author. I give you my time and money, you provide me with escapism.
Right.
When the author admits their hidden agenda is to fundamentally alter the reader's worldview against their will, Delaroz argues that the author has violated that contract.
He feels betrayed.
He does. And he feels a deep responsibility to expose this dynamic because the mainstream media apparatus will only ever praise this type of ideological Trojan horse.
So if the mainstream publishing houses are compromised and the independent Amazon ecosystem is just a pipeline to Hollywood assimilation, where do you go?
That is the big question.
If you are a creator who refuses to take the ticket, or you are a reader who is utterly exhausted by authors trying to covertly drill political lessons into your skull, what is the alternative ecosystem?
Well, the final segment of Delaroz's commentary actually shifts from critique to promotion. Yeah. He outlines his own philosophy of radical independence, positioning his business model as the only viable lifeboat for creators and consumers alienated by the monoculture.
Okay.
He asserts with immense pride that he operates entirely outside of the establishment machinery. He claims he will never seek a Hollywood deal and will never dilute his messaging to appease corporate gatekeepers.
But it's crucial to note how he frames this independence, right? Because he doesn't just say, I prefer doing it my way.
No, he claims he was forced into this model.
Exactly. He asserts that he is effectively blacklisted from traditional publishing entirely because he refuses to play identity politics.
Which is a heavy claim.
It is. He makes a sweeping, highly controversial claim that in the modern publishing landscape, as a white male, you don't get published or secure major deals unless you're willing to publicly virtue signal and conform to specific diversity and ideological mandates.
And that assertion forms the bedrock of his brand identity. He portrays himself as an exile from a corrupted system.
Right.
Because the traditional avenues are supposedly closed to him, he has had to construct an entirely parallel economy to survive. And he provides a fascinating glimpse into the mechanics of this alternative ecosystem.
Because it's not easy, is it?
Not at all. It requires navigating around massive tech platforms that he views as equally hostile. He specifically discusses the friction of relying on YouTube.
Yeah, he calls the YouTube algorithm a painful lottery.
Which is...
It's incredibly accurate for anyone trying to build an audience today.
Oh, absolutely.
You can have 100,000 subscribers, but if the black box algorithm decides it doesn't like the metadata or the political tone of your video, it simply won't show it to the people who actively ask.
Right, the shadow ban.
It is a system of algorithmic shadow banning that rewards inoffensive, advertiser-friendly content and suppresses anything that creates the wrong kind of friction. To survive that, Delaroz has to funnel his audience off the platform as quickly as possible.
This is the critical transition from a rented audience to an owned audience.
Explain that.
Well, as long as you rely on YouTube, Amazon, or Twitter to reach your fans, you are renting space on a digital landlord's property. You're subject to sudden eviction or algorithmic suppression. Delaroz's solution is the aggressive promotion of his direct-to-consumer newsletter. The email list is the ultimate uncensorable mechanism of the modern creator economy.
And he incentivizes it heavily. He isn't just asking for email. He's offering 3 complete free books, a fantasy novel, a sci-fi adventure, and a superhero graphic novel in exchange for direct access to the box.
Which is a huge offering.
It really is. Once he has that email, the algorithm is he can market his universe directly to a self-selected, ideologically aligned readership without interference from Silicon Valley tech executives or New York literary.
He is building an impenetrable walled garden.
And from within the safety of that walled garden, he issues an open challenge.
Right, the interview invitation.
Exactly. The source text concludes with Delaros directly inviting Matt Dinniman to join him for an unscripted long-form interview on his channel. He explicitly states, "I'm not scared to talk or associate,"
which is a highly strategic rhetorical maneuver. He frames his side of the cultural divide as the true, fearless counterculture, the faction willing to engage in open, messy dialogue. Conversely, he paints the mainstream Hollywood apparatus that Dinniman now inhabits as an intellectually cowardly bubble, terrified of associating with anything that challenges their prevailing orthodoxy.
It's a brilliant tactical move because he knows Dinniman, backed by a risk-averse Peacock PR team, can never accept it.
Of course not.
The refusal itself becomes marketing material for Delaros. But if we pull the camera way back and look at the entire board, a profound irony.
Oh, the mirroring effect is striking.
It really is. Delaros spends an hour brutally critiquing Dinniman for allegedly dividing his audience, for injecting politics into his fiction, and for alienating readers. But isn't Delaros executing the exact same playbook from the opposite end of the spectrum?
He absolutely is.
He is building an entire commercial marketing funnel, capturing emails, selling graphic novels, driving Patreon subscriptions fueled almost entirely by political grievance against the mainstream establishment.
Right.
If Dinniman is monetizing left-leaning anti-corporate themes, Delaros is aggressively monetizing anti-woke, anti-establishment.
Exactly.
Is this radical independence truly a noble defense of pure art? Or is it just another highly optimized form of niche digital marketing? They are both mining the culture war for engagement. They are just drilling on opposite sides of the mountain.
That is the most cynical, yet perhaps the most accurate assessment of the modern creator economy.
Yeah.
In a hyperpolarized digital landscape, pure neutrality is algorithmic suicide. Platforms do not reward nuance. They reward friction, outrage, and tribal allegiance.
They feed on it.
They do. Both authors are highly intelligent actors, adapting to the specific survival requirements of their chosen ecosystem. Dinniman is adapting to the brand safety requirements of network television, and Delaros is adapting to the grievance-driven dynamics of independent crowdfunding. The art itself, the books, the characters, the prose, often becomes secondary to the meta-narrative of the creator's political identity.
It feels like we've reached a point where we aren't even allowed to just read a fun book anymore.
I know, it's exhausting.
A story about a regular guy and his pampered cat fighting bizarre monsters in an underground dungeon has been entirely eclipsed by a proxy war over retroactive cancellations, Hollywood conformity, and the definition of bigotry. Every single piece of media, no matter how absurd or seemingly innocent, is instantly drafted into the culture.
It is indicative of a culture that has replaced traditional civic engagement with pop culture consumption.
Wow, say more about that.
Well, when we no longer have shared geographic or civic institution, the media we consume becomes our primary tribal identity.
So what you watch defines who you are.
Exactly. Therefore, the ideological purity of a talking space cat adaptation becomes a matter of intense existential importance.
That is wild, but true.
The journey of Dungeon Crawler Carl perfectly maps this reality. The shift from a beloved indie curiosity to a corporate IP is no longer just a financial milestone. It is a profound transfer of cultural ownership.
Which leaves us with one incredibly surreal, mind-bending thought to take away from all this.
What's that?
Think back to the actual premise. Dungeon Crawler Carl is fundamentally a story about evil, monopolistic, galaxy-spanning corporation.
Right.
This corporation forcibly exploits independent, vulnerable individuals, throws them into a meat grinder, and broadcasts their desperate struggles purely to generate advertising revenue and mass entertainment for trillions of past.
It is the ultimate cynical critique of corporate media exploitation.
And right now, in the real world, this exact satirical property has been purchased by a massive, monopolistic, multi-billion-dollar corporate streaming network.
It's almost too perfect.
They're pouring millions of dollars into focus groups and CGI testing, carefully scrubbing the creator's digital footprint of any controversy, and preparing to broadcast this anti-corporate satire to millions of past subscribers to generate quarterly revenue. So, as you think about the media you're going to consume today, you have to ask yourself, at what point does the satire end and the documentary? Did the independent author successfully use the intergalactic corporation's money to broadcast his subversive message to the galaxy? Or did he just sign a multi-year contract to become the star of their newest reality show?